very nice to be here. Thank you so much for having us. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to discuss a topic called security for maturity, or the maturity model that we developed at Hermetic. And I'm going to talk about why it's an effective approach in managing cloud infrastructure security in general, and how we as a company basically support it with what we do. And if we'll have time, really depends on the Q&A. We're also going to talk a little bit about what we do as a company and how our product takes it. But first, let's talk a little bit about what cloud infrastructure security really poses as challenges to modern enterprises. Now, as we all know, cloud infrastructure is extremely popular, and for a very good reason, right? It's very, very cost effective. It's very, very business oriented type of computing. And with no surprises, we see it adopted in many, many companies, especially new companies that become cloud native. A lot of companies migrate their resources into the cloud. And managing security in the cloud really poses a lot of, I would say, new or accelerated challenges when it comes to what the CISO or what the security organization needs to do. So first of all, it's not really a one-size-fits-all practice. When we used to talk about on-prem, there used to be like cookie cutter solutions or really molds that would work very, very well, or like best practices that you can just go and deploy, and it would make a lot of sense. The elasticity in the cloud really makes the fitting a very, very big challenge to adopt security for cloud infrastructure. Now, it's also very, very multidimensional and complex. Managing cloud infrastructure is a very, very tough business, and it requires a lot of special knowledge. And security, of course, is no different, right? There's a lot of layers, a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts that you need to take care of. And all along, while you're doing that, you also need to make sure that your business functions. Now, environments are also extremely dynamic. They change all the time, right? This is one of the advantages of cloud infrastructure, is that the business side of the company can impose new requests, or change the configurations, or ask for the infrastructure to support new business functions. And of course, you need to support it. And as security practitioners, we also need to defend it. Now, it also requires a lot of very, very specific knowledge, as we mentioned, and this knowledge is scarce today, right? It's not very, very common. It's not very, very easy to find. It's not a very, very easy task to hire people, and we see that across the board. And many people in the organizations are involved when you talk about the practice of securing your cloud infrastructure, because it's so dynamic and because it's so-called democratized the access for managing these resources. You have to take in a lot of people with you in the organization to move that practice, right? To make sure that everything is secure, because a lot of people, all of a sudden have access to these resources, and that poses a lot of challenges as well. So the conclusion from all of this, and this is where the approach comes from, is that growth in this aspect of cloud infrastructure security has to be guided, and it has to be synchronized. You have to make sure that all your efforts, when you do cloud security in all of the various domains, that all of these efforts are actually put in the right place, and you make the most out of them, right? So whenever you do something, you need to make sure that it's across the board. You need to make sure that it applies to every aspect of the infrastructure, even if it changes. You need to make sure that it reaches everyone in the organization and they all adapt to it, right? And the point is that cloud security, and that was also true for, I think, cybersecurity traditionally, but here we see it as much, much more vivid. Cloud security cannot be achieved in a single bound. You cannot just go to your organization, if you're cloud native, or even if you're migrating to the cloud, you can't just go and say, okay, now we're going to do cloud security, right? Now we're going to, in this quarter, we're going to be really, really serious about cloud security. We're going to change everything. And at the end of the quarter, we're going to be secure and everything's going to be okay. That's not true for a quarter, and that's not true for a full year. It just doesn't work that way. It's an iterative process. It's an agile process, a very, very dynamic process. And you have to have some sort of framework or approach where you can actually go to your organization and make sure they advance incrementally and gradually become more and more mature and develop habits that make the infrastructure more secure. Develop habits, of course, develop technology, adopt practices and procedures that make the organization itself more secure. And it's sort of a process for the entire organization. It's not just the CISO's journey, if you will, right? The CISO is the leader. It takes the organization with him, but it's not just for he's not the only one participating in this process. Now, this is an example of the sort of bodies of work that there are today. This is from the CSA. It's their Enterprise Architecture Reference Diagram. It's a great body of work. This is a diagram that references a PDF of like 90 pages, which again, it's a great body of work. It's very, very effective. It's very easy. It's very good to use. However, what you can probably get from this diagram is that it's massive, right? It could be sort of overwhelming. If you bring this to your organization, put this on the table, and you say, okay, this is what I want us to do for cloud security. They're probably going to say, okay, you know what? Let's see where we can work that in to the schedule. Now, imagine that you need to fit this into an iterative process, and you need to do sort of a review of all these domains again and again and again. That would be something that is quite challenging, right? That would be very, very difficult for you to apply in your organization because it's so overwhelming. Now, again, it's a great body of work. So when you know specifically what you want to do, you can go and you can find a reference, and then you can probably find like a lot of great information for you to use. But if you want to have like an holistic view, and you want to do it in a very lightweight way, then this is probably not going to be the framework that you're going to use. So what we came to the conclusion was that there's sort of a missing piece of the puzzle here, and that is for what we call maturity model, which is lightweight, approachable, and effective, right? Something that you can take to your organization and say, okay, we're now going to run through a review that's going to take not a year to do, or a quarter, or even a month. It's going to be very, very, very approachable. It's going to be very, very lightweight. And it's going to be something that we can probably run through a couple of days and then understand where we are, and then understand what is the next step that we need to go, right? Sort of a compass or a North Star for your cloud security journey, right? Because, and this is something that we had a hard time finding. So we basically developed it ourselves. So what we did was we first split up the domains that are relevant, or that are most relevant to cloud infrastructure security. So we split them up into domains relevant to the organization, that is the people and the procedures or processes that are employed by the organization, and domains that are relevant to the technology that you use in order to secure your cloud infrastructure. So, and they're split up into what we call visibility, your ability to, of course, manage your inventory and your resources, prevention capabilities in order to prevent breaches from happening, and detection. And this is really the place where you manage your ability to read through the logs and see what happens in your environment and then respond to it. So the next step was defining the levels, right? So in each of these domains, there are several parameters. And when I say parameters, I'm not saying dozens of parameters. It's between 2 and 5, and we're going to see that in just a second. And the way this works is that organizations, based on our experience with hundreds of companies that we work with, are basically split into 4 levels in each of these parameters. So there's the ad hoc level, where security is basically done sort of as an afterthought. It's not structured in any way, mostly for putting out fires, which is, of course, the worst possible thing, the worst possible time you can actually apply security. At the next stage, there's what we call the opportunistic level. So at this stage, the company actually has a structured plan in order to do security, which is, again, a very big step on its own from the the lowest level. And at the next level, this structured plan is actually repeatable. So once there's a major difference to the environment, there are new requirements, there are new resources, maybe there's an M&A or something like that, then that structured plan for security, that strategy can actually be repeated in a very, very easy manner. Now, at the final stage, what we call the automated and integrated stage, then the security practices and policies are actually embedded both into the technology and into the organization's DNA in a way that actually makes it happen. Most of the features, of course, or most of the policies actually happen without even applying more work to it as an automated process. And then the security organization can actually focus on doing more advanced things. So the way this works is, of course, there's the levels, and then there's the parameters, and then there is very, very little text, right, in the middle. Now, this is blurred out by design, because when I go over these slides, I don't want people to start reading through this information. Don't worry, all this information is available on our website. But the way this works is there's, of course, matrices. There's one for the organization and there's one for technology. And there are, of course, the levels and the parameters. Now, as I said before, there's very, very little text. And a lot of people who see this say, how can there be such little text? And the point is that instead of, and this is where the potency of this model actually comes into play, is that instead of listing like dozens of things that you need to accomplish in order to be in each one of these every stages, what we did was we basically distinguished organizations from one another based on what we call indicators of matriculation. So an indicator of matriculation would be one or two, maybe three things that actually indicate that that organization graduated to a new level, right? So they're not going to be all the things that you need to do in order to actually get to that level, or even perform that indicator of matriculation. But when you're going to try to go into that level, then you're actually going to see that there are a lot of things that you need to do, both on the technology level and on the organization level, in order to actually accomplish this. Now, the way this works, and this is a nice analogy, is in the same way that America set out to go to the moon, right? In the 1960s, America said, we're going to go to the moon. Now, that was a very clear goal, right? Put a man on the moon. But in order to get there, there were a lot of things that actually had to happen. I think that the task force that was on this thing was like 400,000 people. And a lot of the process that went to putting a man on the moon actually developed a lot of things around it, right? This is an article from NASA from 2019 about the benefits, the technological benefits that we all have today because of that specific process. But in 1962, when JFK said, we're going to go to the moon, that was a very clear goal, right? That set in motion, again, put hundreds of thousands of people into motion. So you can think about it in sort of the same way, right? What this model actually allows you to do is set really clear goals, right? You say things like, we want to remove the use of static credentials, right? Sounds simple enough, right? But that the fact that it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy to do. If you try to actually remove the use of all static credentials in your environment, you're going to find it's going to be pretty hard task. And you're going to see that there are a lot of things that you need to do when working with your developers and when working with your workloads and actually removing them. But if you want to set a clear goal and you want to articulate it to stakeholders throughout your organization, then saying we're going to remove the use of static credentials in a quarter, that is something you can actually say and people will understand you, right? So just looking at one example other than the one I mentioned right now, is, for example, this is how it works for the people category, right? So, and this is the parameters for roles and responsibilities within the organization and the training that they go through. And what you see here is that basically what sets organizations apart in this parameter is when organization proliferate the information from the security team to teams in the R&D departments. So this is the main criteria, right? Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I can't really go into that so far. We do have a lot of materials on that, and we're going to talk about it when we conclude the presentation. Now, the point is that if we look at another type of parameter, so for example, a process that we call remediation, then you see that the way this works in the different parameters, the indicators of matriculation actually correspond with those of the people, because the main challenge or the main indicator of an organization has actually grown in the way that they remediate findings, other than, of course, first structuring the process of finding these findings and responding to them, is by actually delegating ownership to R&D teams. So here you can see that there's a correspondence between this process and the other parameters. Now, unfortunately, again, this is a very short presentation. We can't go into the other types. We do have other materials. Now, few things about this. So the first thing is that this kind of approach actually syncs efforts in your organization in effective strides. So when you actually set out to achieve a set of those indicators of matriculation, they actually correspond with one another. So you make sure that efforts that you make are actually effective. So for example, the procedure for handling security incidents corresponds with the technology that you use in order to detect and collect logs, and also your technology to prevent breaches. So it actually syncs. It makes sure that you make the most bang for your buck in each one of these parameters. Now, it also helps design reachable, practical, and clear milestones. So the point is that if you set out an indicator of matriculation to your entire organization, you can actually articulate it in a very clear way and do it very, very simply. Now, again, the action items that would be derived from that would require you to do research and would require, and these bodies of knowledge, of course, they exist, right? You can find them very, very easily. But the clear goal, setting the clear goal and knowing what you need to go after, that's a very huge step taking you forward. Now, as we said, it can help drive a collaborative language because this is how you speak with your stakeholders throughout your organization. And it's not that massive step-by-step document that will actually tell you, okay, go here, do this, this, and this. Now, the point is that this will just be a compass telling you, okay, this is what you need to look for. And then you can find those massive step-by-step documents, which will probably be online, they'll probably be updated all the time, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the way you operationalize this model is quite simple. You make an assessment using those matrices that we saw. You of course, honestly set yourself on where exactly you are in this model. Then you actually set milestones. You say, okay, am I really good enough at the point where I am and where I'm at today? So in this indicator of matriculation, am I really that effective? If not, then you set milestones in order to become more effective in that specific place. Or you look at the next level and say, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to aspire to. And then you build it into your roadmap. Now, after that, you actually evaluate solutions in order to alleviate the challenges of actually meeting those indicators of matriculation. And then, of course, you execute on that plan. And the most important thing is that you repeat this process again and again and again in very frequent, hopefully as frequent as possible. Now, just a few things I want to leave you with to remember. Cybersecurity is a process. So this is why this kind of model is important, right? It's not an event. It's not something that starts and ends at a certain point. And maturity level is a commitment, right? It's not a certification. You can also go back. You can regress, right? If you don't do that process of continuously evaluating where you are, then you're not going to be successful, because the organization grows and you as a security professional also need to grow with it, right? You can't stay in one place because you will inevitably go back. And of course, simple does not mean easy. Setting a clear milestone is very important, but it's not where the job ends. The job is actually to take that milestone and then break it down into action items and then use technology in order to solve it. And this is exactly why we do what we do. We actually provide technology that through each one of these parameters actually allows to do the process a lot easier and a lot simpler. And of course, if you want to
we have another session, so we need to.
So I'm just going to finish up right now. So if you want to find out more about how we do it and how we support that process, you can, of course, contact us for more information, and you can go on our website and see the white paper and more resources for this model. Thank you very much.